Christian's going to talk about knowing when to put on your mask. She's a professional therapist at Voice of Hope Counseling and a sex educator and works with Sex Ed Talk, LLC. She's working with individuals and groups of all ages and backgrounds. She has worked as a co-occurring therapist, helping individuals to improve their mental health and manage their addiction. She has also been the director of counseling at Girls Inc of Omaha, working with girls ages 5 to 18 to become strong, smart, and bold individuals. And the reason that I actually got to meet Christian is through her wonderful aunt, Mary, who I love dearly. But also, Christian co-authored the book called Vaginas and Periods 101, which is a pop-up book that is now internationally recognized. So, Christian, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I hope this is working, and thumbs up if you can hear me. Just, it's all working? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd be lying if I'm not living in a little bit of fear in this moment. I've spoken at conferences before, but this is definitely my first Zoom conference, and usually I'm, up and moving around, and so trying to sit in one place is not my natural state by any means. But yeah, so as Annie said, when we first got connected with each other, it was with my sex educator hat on, because both of us work. One of our areas of work is helping women become more confident in their bodies, and our belief in knowledge is power in general, and especially with women. But as things have changed, so did what I felt like my previous discussion on the importance of sex education and empowerment just didn't feel like it fit with everything that was going on right now. So as part of working through fear is also dealing with change, because that is when fear finds us, is when things are changing and uncertainties. So I thought it was important to actually focus more on how the working through fear also fits with what we are all going through right now with COVID, and specifically managing self-care during times of fear and change. So that's going to be kind of the overarching theme as we kind of go through this. So I wanted to start with talking about when I first started out as a therapist, which is my other hat. I got a job at a 60-bed inpatient 6-month rehab center, working about 50 to 60 hours a week. And, straight out of graduate school, and just, doe-eyed and trying to figure it all out. But as you can imagine, in this job, I was helping people that were at their ultimate lowest. They usually were court ordered to be there. This was not their first round at a rehab center. Kids had been taken away, lives lost, and lots and lots of trauma through each individual client. And my client load personally was 20 clients, but I still had interactions with all 50 to 60. So this is 50 or to 60 very personal stories coming at you at all times. And for, they were looking at, for me, just like, it felt like desperately looking to me for help. And as a new therapist, I found myself living in fear on a daily basis for, 10 to 12 hours a day. And having fear about how to help, how to manage their pain. Was I doing enough? Did I know enough? But also fear of managing my own time and dealing with my own feelings of how to prioritize how I felt about things after spending all day listening to people tell me their most horrific, personal stories. And then where did I fit in the grand scheme of everything that they were going through, and how I was feeling was that justified or worthy of my own feelings in many ways. Um, and so all of this kind of eventually led to a breaking point of being in that fear of no longer taking care of myself, and eventually really withdrawing from the relationships around me because I just didn't have the emotional capacity, because that fear just can become so big and overwhelming. But I want to say that these feelings of fear and hopelessness are not exclusive to just helping professions by any means. I mean, I think I hope I'm tapping into anytime you are going through a big change or you feel out of your element. And um, bringing this to the now is this global scale of uncertainty and being overwhelmed that we're all currently experiencing. And I think, again, thinking about, I mean, I need to take a breath just thinking about it, I mean, it's just that uncertainty, fear, and change can just, it's hard to figure out where we prioritize in all of that. And thinking about, are my feelings of fear in this moment valid compared to what other people may or may not be going through, right? And it's interesting, as I'm still being a therapist through all this, through telehealth, and I've had, again, the privilege of kind of seeing into how this is affecting everyone, and the collective things that's kind of happening. And the big thing that particularly has come out this week is everybody's kind of getting, I've noticed the pattern of kind of itchy for like freedom or wanting the break. And the thing that I've been really talking to my clients about is our brains and our bodies are not designed to live at this level of anxiety and stress and change and fear for prolonged periods of time. And so when whether it's specifically to this COVID or starting a new job or being in a helping profession or whatever it may be, if it lasts for too long, our brains eventually have to go into survival mode and can't comprehend anymore, and things get lost. And it affects our bodies, our healthy habits. And I think, from what I can see, some other speakers are probably going to talk about that a little later, so I won't go too much into that. But I think it's just important to remember fear is important because it helps us move through change and, move forward sometimes. But if we're in it for too long, everything will shut down. And, my note specifically says that without relief, we will crumble. We will no longer be able to help ourselves or others, and we will end up living our greatest fear of failure itself, right? If we stay in fear for too long, the thing that we are fearing of failing will in fact happen. It is that self-fulfilling prophecy. So all of this leads me to the point of this talk, which is knowing when to put on your own mask, which this is one of my favorite analogies that I'm about to share, but I felt like it fits so well with, again, what we're all going through right now. So when I was reaching this breaking point as this new therapist and feeling really overwhelmed, the best advice I ever got was this. If you've ever flown on a plane, the biggest takeaway that you hear from the safety speech, the one that you're barely listening to, is you need to put on your oxygen mask first. Okay, you barely hear anything else they say, but that's the one thing that I feel like everybody remembers. It says, before you help anybody else, you have to put on your oxygen mask first, because we cannot help others if we aren't getting any air. And we can't move from fear to fearless without first making sure that our oxygen tank is full. Okay, I just want to let that sit in for a second, because I know that a lot of times people can feel like, but I don't want to be selfish, right? I don't want to come across as uncaring or selfish and that I'm not helping. And so the analogy that this brings this to in the now is, if you look around today at the heroes that we're talking about, that before facing fears, that each healthcare worker, first responder, essential worker, all of them, the pictures we see is with their mask on, right? And it's hard, but they have to understand, and they do prioritize, that they have to take care of themselves first, not out of selfishness, but so that they can be more present and better able to show up the next day. Okay? Because if we're talking about our own oxygen mask, if we're frantically in our brains trying to suck in air that's not there and trying to help somebody else, we are not going to be fully present to actually take care of the other person or to accomplish this new goal that we may or may not have. And that's why, I mean, I know some of you probably are even some of those people making masks for our healthcare workers right now, because we want them to not have to be living in such fear because they can't take care of themselves, that then they're not able to help the people that they are actually want to help. And so I think, so anyways, this all kind of fits in that, since my first job, I'm going to take a little bit of a turn here, but I promise it all comes back. That is my first job as a therapist at the rehab center. I have faced several fears and changes that I could talk for at length about, but that includes eventually leaving the rehab center and moving on to Girls Inc, which was moving from adults and addiction to children 5 to 18 that are in lower income families, starting my own private practice and figuring out how to get clients and, make a name for myself, and fear of who the heck would want to listen to me, or, can I sustain that on my own without the protection of being at an agency, falling in love, right? That's like the biggest jump of faith and fear that's out there. As Annie mentioned, then my latest big one was writing and publishing a pop-up book about vaginas and periods, and going into something that I had no background in, and book-wise, and trying to fuddle through how to make that happen, while at the same time as I was doing that, I became pregnant with twins, and now the fears of being a mom and trying to manage twin 2-year-olds is anyways, that's its own topic for sure. But the point is that each one of these changes, they have fear, and I am by no means going to say that moving from this fear to fearless was easy or graceful, or that I didn't make mistakes, or sometimes forget my own advice for that matter, through all this. But the one thing that you have to come back to again, when you find yourself gasping for air, is to try and look around and say, oh, did I put my oxygen mask on first? Because if I didn't do that, I'm not going to be able to accomplish any of the things that I want on the other side. So again, it's important to check into yourself and make sure you have your own mask on. Some practical tips around that when I'm talking about this oxygen mask. I know sometimes we see some really great memes out there about like self-care and bubble baths, and by all means, bubble baths are great, and that's an important step of it. But self-care is really about being attuned to yourself and working on trusting your ability to know where you're at, and which parts of yourself are overextended. And so the first thing I always say, coming back to, is um, resetting your priorities. Okay. The example I'll give to this is when I was writing the book and I was, I had my co-author and partner. It's something I cared a lot about, I mean, and I'm, very enthusiastic about it. And if people have more questions about that, by all means, reach out. But the fact is, I had just become a new mom of twins too. And I was trying to manage all these things and fears about both of these things that I had to take a step back, take my oxygen mask and go, okay, what needs to be the priority right now? Not only my own sanity, so that way I can be present as a mom and as this co-author, but there are times when I had to ask my partner to take more on the book because I had just become a new mom. And ironically enough, now she's a new mom, and so the roles have reversed, but that's that reprioritizing and communication around that. Of course, always knowing who your support group is and making sure that you have people that are going to encourage you to move through the fear than pulling you back. People that have their own oxygen masks on is maybe the way that is, sticking with that analogy, so that they're not trying to steal yours at the same time and take away your oxygen. And checking in on both your mental health and your physical health. What else do I have as your practical steps? Don't forget to take breaks. And of course, having fun. I know that's it sounds so simple, and maybe again the bubble bath is a part of that, but laughing and dancing and knowing that has to be a priority to move through the fear. And I think we've seen a lot of that as people are moving through this current global crisis, is you see people going towards that, by doing fun things with families and, clapping for healthcare workers and, finding ways to have fun even during something so serious. And so if you're finding yourself living more in fear than fun, it's time to come back to basics and reprioritize. You gotta put on that oxygen mask. So yeah, so those are my practical tips. That's the theme I really wanted to talk about. And I'm much more of a please ask me questions kind of a person. So I think, at this point I'll turn it over and see if people have any questions or something you'd like me to go into more detail about. So.
Yes, thank you so much. I think a lot of people were commenting in the chat just about self-care, and somebody even said sometimes people consider when they take time for themselves as being selfish. Mm-hmm. And so just something to consider, as we do take that time. How do you respond to that?
This is probably something that comes up with every single client that I've ever worked up with. I think they're, I think this even comes down to a cultural level as well of this, feeling like if you're not doing for others, then yeah, that you are being selfish. And I'm going to say the same thing I just said, which is, yeah, but if you're not okay, if you don't have any oxygen, you're never going to be good for anybody. And so, I say it over and over and over again, because I think we've all been there. And if we can all reflect on it at some point where we were totally, consumed by another relationship, consumed by a job, consumed by our kids. We can all probably name at least one moment where everybody's probably had a breaking point at some point and realizing that they had overextended themselves outside of themselves. And then again, I
think a lot of people are realizing that now when they have more home time. Maybe they didn't realize that they were gone so much, that they were missing out on so many things. But I think for me, at least, I've been realizing how much I was giving outside and how much I was gone, and how much I just really appreciate the downtime. And so just walking into that. Someone asked,
Yeah,
how
you must not have 2-year-old twins. I don't know with this downtime.
you're right, teenagers are a little bit easier.
Yes.
That's fair. Someone asked, how are some ways that you recognize fear? Because it's not always that feeling, that stinking feeling, but sometimes it's anger, and sometimes it presents itself in other ways. So maybe talk about, how do you recognize fear?
Oh, this can be a little more individualized for each person for sure. I mentioned that, um, I said withdrawing from relationships, and that didn't actually mean socially withdrawing from relationships. If I'm totally honest, I was in my 20s, was going out all of the time. I was always going out. And that had more to do with recognizing now that I couldn't be alone, that if I was alone with my thoughts for too long, that was contributing to the fear. And so instead there was a lot of avoidance, and maybe went to many parties, and just so the withdrawing from relationships had more to do with avoiding really intimate relationships, but definitely always wanting to be out. So there are so many examples, like you said, like anger being one of them, just being more irritable. But for you, it might be that you used to go out and now you never go out, or you don't know how to spend time alone, or just if you're always, I think the biggest thing is if you always feel like you're going at an 11, 12, like, again, we're not, our brains and bodies are not equipped to go at that level for that long. So
Yeah, so it's
I hope
good to
that
take
answers
some
that question.
time, some downtime, some self-care. And sometimes what some people are chatting about is self-care. Sometimes, like you said, means a bubble bath, and sometimes it means digging in a little bit deeper and just spending quiet with ourselves. And so I think we're going to hear, like you said, we're going to hear a little bit more about that later on, but all of those things. But ultimately, we just have to first take care of ourselves, and then we're equipped to take care of others. So thank you so much for being here, Christian, for overcoming your fear to do a first time.
Yeah. And again, if anybody, I think emails and things are out there, or websites. So by all means, if you have something more specific that I didn't get to, and maybe I'll try and read through these comments a little bit, and, try and respond maybe a little individually, but feel free to reach out in any capacity. So
excellent. Thank you so much.